College enrollments crashed this past spring due to excessive COVID restrictions, among other reasons. Now we see the plan. All those despicable white kids staying home are about to be replaced by swarms of newly arrived illegal aliens. What a scam. You drive away kids because you're not teaching them, and yet you open the border to all kinds of kids who need radical remediation. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today's show is sponsored by Mike Lindell and our friends at MyPillow. MyPillow has sold millions of pillows, sheets, towels, and now you can save up to 66% when you use the promo code Dr. Duke. We're like a kid at Christmas. We've never had a promo code before. We're kind of excited about it. It's kind of cool, right? So Dr. Duke, D-R-D-U-K-E is we got to get one from Katie too. Patrick something, right? Anyway, that's Dr. Duke, D-R-D-U-K-E. Use it and save up to 66%. Mike is a great patriot and a conservative and a Christian. We want to support him. All his businesses, all his pillows and sheets are made here in this country in his own warehouse in Minnesota. Very red, white, and blue. Again, use the code Dr. Duke, D-R-D-U-K-E, to save big money at MyPillow and help out the Dr. Duke Show. Today, we start with the drop in school enrollments, as a new study shows college campuses across the country experienced massive decline throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. We know that this happened to the public schools as well, right? There are about 1 million kids that they can't even identify. They don't even know where they went to, right? Places in Los Angeles lost hundreds of thousands of kids that they don't even know where they are or what they're up to. So this is a big problem. We're going to focus here on the colleges. That second semester, and I, as a university professor, I saw this. Started in the fall, all the restrictions, get to Christmas, and boom, you get to the new year. People are getting tired of it. A lot of kids recognize that online learning at the college level, you can't get nearly as much done. It's not nearly as efficient. So a lot of those enrollments tanked, and universities can't afford that loss in revenue, but it hit them pretty hard. And so you see the recognition, I think, that we've got to get back to business as usual. But one of the things that's so insidious about this, though, is the same people who are complaining about we were losing all this revenue are the same ones, the universities, that have gone all about, in my opinion, have gone on trying to deal with COVID in many of the worst ways. Universities are some of the most repressive places in the world. Still, what do we find out from a college? Rhodes College, we'll see this week. Rhodes College down in Tennessee, they're going to charge unvaccinated kids a $1,500 health fee. It shows you what kind of you're dealing with here. And so kids are good. In other words, the long and the short of it is you're walking away from college because of what they did with COVID. Probably smart that you do.
Well, I mean, COVID has been detrimental across the world for all the things bad about it, but I think this is maybe an instance of one good thing that has come from COVID is we're really shining a light finally on the universities and what is it that you're getting for your money.
Exactly.
Or what you're not getting. And as you pointed out that the spring semester kids were like, you know what? I'm not getting my money's worth. And even though I'm probably taking out student loans for this and I'm not paying them right now, I will be paying them. They said, I'm going to walk away. And the undergraduate college enrollment numbers, they're showing it's down nearly 5%. In your mind, you could say, 5%, what does that equate to? Well, when you have, it's about 727,000 fewer students. How much is one semester of tuition? You do the math.
Room and board.
You know how much
plans,
the money
parking,
is.
Exactly.
It just demonstrates so very clearly how much college is just a business. They don't care about the education part. They care about you're paying for tuition, you're paying for room and board, you're paying for all the other fees to pay the professors, you're paying for all the diversity this, diversity that. That's what you are paying for, and that's why they care that you're going away. Not about the education.
That's
but about
my
the
focus, and I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think a good college can give good education to kids, but you got to get rid of all this woke nonsense. Right now, how many shows have we done in the Dr. Duke Show where we've talked about this growing expanse of diversity warriors? I mean, you want to know why college is so expensive and so ultimately so unsatisfying, so unable to deliver on its promises about intellectual, higher education, people prepared for career. Why are they unable to deliver? They're unable to deliver because they've sold their souls to wokeness. All this. You get rid of all the diversicrats. If you just purged every college of their largely unnecessary diversicrats, you could cut tuition by 15, 20%. And you'd still bring in the same amount of money. And because you got rid of that class of bureaucrats, that politicized ideological class of bureaucrats. Look, you hire 40 diversity officers for a school of 12,000 students. They've got to justify their job and their salaries. They get paid really well, as much or in many cases more than faculty to do what they do. And so you got 40 diversity officers making 80, 90 grand a year. The one thing you're going to make sure they find is that you need more of them, right? Or at least as many to keep being, or they all need raises because there's so much systemic racism and microaggressions on college campuses. There's no reason to pay that kind of money for an education that is boiled down to critical race theory across the humanities, across the social sciences. All they're getting under the guise of history and philosophy and literature and sociology and psychology and anthropology and religious studies and theater and art history, blah, blah, blah. All they're getting is critical race theory again and again and again, packaged differently for each discipline, but it's the same stupid nonsense. And it's ironic. I mean, this is higher education. The tenets of critical race theory are juvenile, and racist. So you're paying all that money for higher education, and the higher education is nothing more than white people bad, racist. Black people, victim, innocent. It never really gets more complicated than that. Cancel Western culture. All that money, this is higher education now? The ideas that are driving these changes are childish, racist, backward, and demonstrably untrue.
All right, before we move on to the next story, just a quick reminder that the best way to access our content is to download our Freedom Project Media app. Simply search Freedom Project in your app store, and when you download, make sure you allow for notifications. Also, if you like listening to the audio podcast, we're available on Apple, Google, SoundCloud, and everywhere else. Now, back to enrollments. At the college level, it appears that they're going down the slide. But supposedly, according to the Associated Press, the kindergarten classrooms are gearing up and preparing for a surge of enrollment. And it's for a multitude of reasons. Now, we already know that with the potential that there might be more kindergartners, schools are like, well, we need to hire more staff. We need to spend more money. We need to make sure we're ready for this.
More money for Black Lives Matter paradigms.
That too. But we have Stephen Barnett, who's the senior co-director of the National Institute for Early Education Research at Rutgers University. Job title. He said that the job of the kindergarten teacher just got a lot harder. And so what they're thinking is that because of the pandemic, a lot of parents decided, I'm not going to send my kid to kindergarten this year. We're going to wait till the following year. And then there's already the other kids who are aging up normal.
Yeah.
And so then there's going to be a surge.
This is the interesting thing. First of all, we're not talking about, there are a lot of parents who walked away during COVID, and there are a lot who aren't. I think the schools are going to be surprised. They're not going to get as many back as they think they are. I think there are people who've walked away or are staying away. But what they're banking on is this open borders Joe, right? What they've decided is that, well, we're going to get rid of all those largely, and still, probably the largest demographic walking away is going to be white people. We know that Black homeschooling is hugely more popular than it was 2 or 3 years ago. In terms of demographics, the fastest growing segment of homeschoolers or people or alternative schoolers is Black people. But given the the percentage differential between the number of whites and Blacks in the country, it's still going to be mostly white people walking away. You're going to lose people in the public schools, even before the COVID, looking at the numbers before COVID. However, with open border policies, we're having hundreds of thousands every couple weeks cross the borders. Kids being dumped off by coyotes, their parents at home. We're then airlifting the families in. Biden's administration is putting immigrants on private planes and sending them to all states in the union. There's nothing you can do about it. So you're going to have thousands and thousands and thousands, tens and tens of thousands of young children who have very little education in their background at all, who are going to need to be educated. That's what your new public enrollment's going to be. So what you're going to lose a lot, but then you're going to this influx of no other way express what they are, illegal immigrant children who will get free public educations. And so what does this mean? To what degree now will your kindergartens, your public school kindergartens, have to begin teaching Spanish? These kids aren't ready to learn English learning. At what point are we going to have to start retooling early education classes to focus on this huge? Because as we know, white Americans are having fewer and fewer babies, right? Minority groups, particularly Hispanics, coming here illegally and those that are here already are having children. So what you're about to see, I think, in 10 years is a possibility that most white kids have exited the public schools, but minority kids, in particular first-generation immigrant kids, will be the major constituents of our public schools, and what kind of crazy changes that's going to engender.
Well, we do know, based on what we're prepping for this upcoming fall, one example they talk about is what's happening in Minnesota, where the St. Paul School District is anticipating nearly a 22% increase in the number of kindergartners. So, I mean, if you have that, then it'll be quite interesting to see if that pans out. Now, they do plan to do testing over the summer to identify special needs that have been missed, because in addition to the kids basically being redshirted, that's what they're kind of calling them.
Nice use of the college football vernacular. Loving it.
Yeah, so the kindergartners could be coming in from all angles. They're going to have to identify, take a look at each of these students and where they're at, because some of these kids will be repeating, some of them will be
and you're going to get fourth graders who belong in second grade or in sixth grade who belong in second grade. Inevitably, these kids at all grade levels are going to have to step back.
Yeah, so we're going to see. But according to Lori Erickson, who is a kindergarten teacher, she also coordinates the St. Paul District's pre-kindergarten program. She said the district just learned that they're going to get more money to expand their Jumpstart to Kindergarten summer program. So, maybe your kids are already participating in this, or you're going to see it going around this summer. But that Jumpstart to Kindergarten program also includes a trip to the Strawberry Patch and visits from a dancer and a painter. So,
how much you want to bet that dancer is trans or?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But she did say the biggest thing on our radar is recognizing the trauma that has happened. And she said that the various staffers are ready to rumble.
Wait, trauma. So that trauma is our fault, right? I mean, these people are dropping kids off without parents. Coyotes are smuggling across the border. The trauma of coming here, which of course is our fault. I mean, we just didn't make it easy enough to fill our schools with non-English speakers. We just unvaccinated non-school kids. We do non-English speakers. We didn't do enough. And so, of course, whites. So here's the other question. Are these kids going to get a real education, or are they going to be pandered to because they're not white? Are we going to actually make them learn English? Are we going to actually teach them, or is that white supremacy? Are we going to ask them to assimilate? What are we going to teach them? Or are we going to give them a full-on course of social justice? Because that's what the other kids are getting.
I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see. Now, we had reported on this about a month or so ago, where New York City's kindergarten enrollments were supposedly down.
Way down.
And so it's like Panic at the Disco right there. So whether or not the various numbers, what they pan out to be, it's all a social science experiment, essentially.
And it's not an accident. What you're seeing here is the conscious displacement of so-called white kids by immigrant kids. That's what this is. That's exactly what Biden is doing. We're getting rid of, and this has been a hallmark of Common Core too, right? This idea that we got to dumb down American kids, actually American kids, black kids, white kids who've been here, whose parents have been here for a long, dumb them down, right? So that there's not much distinction between them and the unskilled workers that we're importing by the hundreds of thousands week by week by week. And so the whole demographic is about to shift. And my point to you, Mom and Dad, is one more reason why you need to get your kids now out of the public schools. You had the whole COVID break. You got used to the idea that they weren't going every day to the public schools. Do not send them back. Because what's going to happen when all of these non-speaking English, and again, they got to be educated. We let them in, got to educate them, but they're not going to have separate schools. They're going to be in your schools, which means that the level of teaching is going to be to them. That's the common denominator, not your kids, not your kid who speaks English really well and can read and write. That he's not the premise. He's not really the main demographic anymore. It's these influx of minority kids who don't speak the language very well, who are generally behind. That's where the effort's going to go.
We've anticipated this report coming out for a while now with the pandemic and all of the depression caused by people of all ages, but especially our children who, when the pandemic hit, basically were told, okay, you must now stay in your house. You must not talk to your friends, at least face to face. You're stuck here. You're going to have to do school from home. It's no wonder now that we do have the data showing that suicide attempts are spiking, and this time the data is showing it's among the teen girls. And the data is coming from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, and it says that suicide attempts by these teen girls actually spiked. Among girls ages 12 to 17 years old, the average weekly visits to an emergency department for suspected suicide attempts, and we're looking at February of this year to March, so a 2-month window, it was 50.6% higher than the same period last year. So you're looking February to March of last year, 2020, but right before the pandemic, to a whole year into this pandemic, you're up 50% in the number of girls attempting suicide.
Yeah, and there is something about girls that is more susceptible to the kind of propaganda that we see in the public schools. They respond more quickly to the radical leftist ideologies than the boys do. And that's because we largely blame the boys, right? We tend to give white girls a pass and blame white boys. When we're talking about who destroyed culture, who's really evil, who are really the white supremacists, we focus that way more on white males than we do white females and males. Nevertheless, the fact is that I think there's a great sensibility when you're teaching young girls, or young kids generally, but young girls in particular, when you're teaching them that your whole culture is evil, that your parents and your grandparents and it's weird. We're a culture that is more than ever preaching about heritage, right? All these DNA companies that want to show you back, all these very politically correct commercials that show who your ancestors. I didn't realize I was 45% Native American. That's really cool, right? I'm not just a boring Scottish guy anymore. So now you got that one aspect of it about how important our heritage is. And now you're telling little kids that if they come from certain places, Europe, America, they're part of Western culture, that their whole history is toxic, that they bear in their very persons the guilt and responsibility for all the evils of the world. Are you surprised? And are you surprised in particular that this hits girls to some degrees even harder than it hits boys?
It's important to note that attempted suicide by boys did rise as well.
Yes,
so none of this is good. And they found that the boys, their attempts rose by 3.7%. Yep. And again, any percent, that means one more case, is bad.
Well, the question is this, and I don't think we have the statistics. Is it broken down by race? See, that's what we would need to know. I mean, that would be a very interesting question. Are these largely white girls and boys? Because then you could do a correlation study about all this anti-white rhetoric, right? Is it primarily white? And I bet it is. I bet the highest jumps from demographic to demographic would be white children, white boys and girls, but we'd have to look deeper into the numbers.
And what's more sad about this is CNBC even reported that the study likely underrepresents the real number of suspected suicide attempts because Americans were hesitant to go to hospitals during the pandemic in fear of contracting COVID-19. In spring 2020, there was a 16.8% drop in emergency department visits among men and women aged 18 to 24 compared with the same time period a year prior. So we do know, and I know of plenty of people in my life who said, oh, I feel sick, but I'm not going to go to the doctor, or I'm not going to go to the emergency room because I don't want them to, either give me COVID or say I have COVID or whatnot. So when you apply that then to teenage girls or boys or any of our kids who are vulnerable and need that help and they're not getting it, then you're going to obviously have more attempts that we just don't know about.
I don't mean to pick the dead bones of this long-killed horse, but go back to this for a second. Can you imagine what the suicide rates would be if we were targeting black kids the same way we're targeting white kids, or if we were singling out Hispanic kids at age 5 and 6 and 7 and 9 and 11 and doing nothing but lecturing these kids about how complicit they are, how evil they are, how wicked their ancestors were, how evil their cultures are. If you were doing that, the numbers would be catastrophic. And every one of those suicides would be blamed on toxic curriculum, toxic teachers, toxic education. But now you've got it flipped around. And that's exactly what you're doing to white kids. And you have no shame, no embarrassment. You think you're doing the right thing. These suicides are on you, critical race teachers. All of you educrats who have decided that reading and writing are unnecessary, but heaping mound after mound of racial guilt on kids too young to even understand what they're being accused of. These suicides are all on you. And the fact that you don't care about that, because you really would care if this was happening the other way, shows just how, for lack of a better word, simmeringly racist you are, despite all your attempts to prove that you're not. It's time now for some real education. And what we've done this week is the stories get nastier and nastier, more and more involved about just how innately racist and inhumane what the teachers and the educrats and the superintendents and the principals are doing to your kids, and what they will be doing to your kids starting September of this year. All of the ways they're going to grind your kids into dust, especially if they happen to be white. We like to do a little extracurricular talk here in our final segment, just to remind you how humane, how gentle, how probing, how philosophical, how thought-provoking education and educational thought can be. And so we've got some more really important humanists, people who have been involved. And I don't mean humanists in the sense that they're divorced from God or that whole tradition. I mean very oftentimes Christian humanists, humanists who are concerned about education in a Christian, God-driven culture. So here's a couple of quotes I want to just share with you about what we've lost, what we are losing, what's going away by replacing all learning with cheap political propaganda. George Couros wrote, quote, "Learning is creation, not consumption. Knowledge is not something a learner absorbs, but something that a learner creates." The imaginative aspect of education. Where is that imagination when you're teaching 1619? Where is that imagination? Well, your entire view of American history is one long racist, sexist debacle. There's no way to see or to imagine that which is better or moving forward or progress. Go back to the next quote from Ivan Illich. Quote, "Schools are designed on the assumption that there is a secret to everything in life, that the quality of life depends on knowing that secret, that secrets can only be known by orderly successions, and that only teachers can properly reveal these secrets. An individual with a schooled mind conceives of the world as a pyramid of classified packages accessible only to those who can carry the proper tags." That's exactly right. That we want to act as if what public school teachers are doing is so deep and sublime, that learning and mystery and knowledge and curiosity and imagination, that without the rigid structure, the inflexible and toxic structures of American public school rooms, that without them, kids wouldn't learn. No, without them, kids would have a chance of learning
All right, well, if you enjoy our content, please support us by joining the Patriot Club. Your one-time $99 tax-deductible donation allows us to bring you these crazy stories every day. Simply visit patriotclub.us to get signed up, and as a little thank you, we will ship you our signature tumbler. Now we want to take a moment to show some love to our Patriot Club members, and today we'd like to give a shout out to William from St. Matthews, South Carolina. William, thank you.
St. Matthew, South Carolina. William is a voice crying out in the wilderness. How do you like that? And that wraps up this show for Freedom Project. I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, stay educated, my friends.